The Chicago winter air followed Clara Wynn as she pushed open the heavy metal door of Black Steel Combat Academy. The gym's reputation preceded it, a breeding ground for champions and a graveyard for dreamers. At 5'2" and 110 pounds, the 28-year-old woman moved like a shadow among giants. Her faded gray tank top revealed lean, defined muscles that went unnoticed beneath the harsh overhead lights. The receptionist's acrylic nails tapped impatiently as Clara signed in. "This ain't a place for delicate flowers," she announced, voice carrying across the gym floor where heavyweight fighters paused to stare. "Bet she doesn't last 5 minutes." Clara's hazel eyes remained focused on the paperwork, a slight tightening at the corners, the only sign she'd heard. She adjusted her plain cap, her movements economical and precise. 3 professional fighters edged closer, phone cameras raised to document what they assumed would be the day's entertainment. An outsider about to learn a painful lesson about belonging. Black Steel's interior matched its reputation, unforgiving and raw. The brick walls sweated decades of effort, every stain a story of victory or defeat. Heavy bags hung like sentinels, their leather surfaces cracked and worn from countless impacts. The concrete floor bore the scars of dropped weights and dragged equipment. This was no polished fitness center with gleaming machines and motivational posters. This was a forge where fighters were either tempered or broken. Clara paid her day fee in cash, each bill placed precisely on the counter. The receptionist snatched the money with a smirk, sliding a waiver form toward her. "Sign here, here, and here," she said, tapping blood-red nails against the paper. "Basically says we're not responsible when you get hurt." The emphasis on when rather than if drew chuckles from the onlookers. As Clara completed the form, her sleeve shifted slightly, revealing a glimpse of a faded scar along her forearm. The mark was surgical in its precision, nothing like the jagged memories most fighters carried. A veteran boxer leaning against the wall narrowed his eyes, something about the scar triggering a distant recognition, but the moment passed as quickly as it had come. Clara moved toward the locker area, her worn gym bag slung across her shoulder. The bag itself told a story the observers missed. Military-grade canvas with reinforced stitching, its faded appearance masking quality that surpassed anything sold in commercial sporting goods stores. She selected a locker in the far corner, methodically arranging her belongings with the efficiency of someone accustomed to making temporary spaces functional. A pair of middleweights warming up nearby exchanged glances. $20, says she asks for the manager within 10 minutes, one said, loud enough to be heard. 30 says she's crying before she reaches the mat, responded the other. Clara removed her basic black shoes, replacing them with worn boxing shoes that seemed unremarkable, except to the most discerning eye. The Italian leather had been broken in over what must have been thousands of hours, the wear patterns revealing a fighter who moved with technical precision rather than brute force. The gym's regular rhythm continued around her, the sharp crack of gloves against pads, the rhythmic thump of jump ropes against concrete, the occasional grunt of exertion, but an undercurrent of anticipation had begun to flow. Word spread quickly that a newcomer had arrived, one who seemed oblivious to the unwritten hierarchy that governed spaces like Black Steel. As Clara finished her preparations and moved toward the training area, phones emerged from pockets, social media posts already being composed to document what everyone assumed would be a brief and humiliating visit. No one noticed how her eyes catalogued every exit, how she gauged distances between stations, how she analyzed the movements of the gym's apex predators with the calm assessment of a hunter rather than the anxiety of prey. No one, that is, except for one aging trainer in the corner, whose furrowed brow suggested he was seeing something the others had missed entirely. Skylar Monroe stalked across the training floor, her platinum braid swinging like a pendulum. As head coach and 6-time regional champion, her word was law. She spotted Clara wrapping her hands in the corner and approached with theatrical slowness. "Well, look what wandered in," Skylar announced, her voice cutting through the rhythmic thud of fists against heavy bags. "We've got ourselves a special guest today." Fighters stopped mid-drill, turning to watch. "Our lost mouse here gets the honor of training with Jason Iron Bear himself." The gym erupted in whistles and laughter. A circle formed around Clara as she methodically continued preparing, each movement deliberate. Her shadow boxing began with whispered jabs and perfect footwork that should have earned respect, but instead triggered more amusement. "Someone tell the fitness enthusiast this isn't cardio hour," called a tattooed heavyweight, triggering a fresh wave of laughter. Clara pivoted with surprising speed, her phantom combinations flowing with hypnotic precision. For just a moment, the practiced eye might notice something extraordinary in her movement: the perfect weight transfer, the counterbalance, the coiled potential energy. But the moment passed, dismissed by all but one veteran trainer who narrowed his eyes thoughtfully before looking away. The circle around Clara tightened as more fighters abandoned their workouts to join the spectacle. A welterweight champion with cauliflower ears and knuckles that had been broken and reset multiple times leaned against a support beam, his assessment more calculated than the others. "Look at her stance," he muttered to his sparring partner. "Something's not adding up." His observation went unheard as Skylar clapped her hands, commanding attention. "Today is Hell Sparring Day, people. Our monthly tradition where we separate the warriors from the wannabes." Their smile was all teeth and no warmth as her gaze settled on Clara. Perfect timing for our visitor to experience black steel hospitality. The mention of Hell Sparring Day sent a current of excitement through the crowd. This monthly ritual was infamous in Chicago's fighting circuit. A brutal gauntlet where newcomers faced the gym's elite in no-holds-barred sessions. What had begun years ago as a legitimate training practice had devolved into blood sport entertainment under Skylar's leadership. Clara continued her warm-up, seemingly oblivious to the growing anticipation around her. She moved to an unoccupied heavy bag in the far corner, her strikes making barely audible impacts, yet causing the 100-pound bag to sway with surprising momentum. A fighter with a national ranking tattoo on his neck nudged his training partner. $10 says she runs for the door when Bear enters the ring. 20 says she doesn't make it to the ring at all, came the response. Skylar circled Clara like a predator, assessing her with unconcealed disdain. "Where did you train before, Mouse?" she asked, voice dripping with mock interest. Clara's response was minimal. "Here and there." "Here and there," Skylar repeated, turning to make sure everyone heard. "Well, here is where champions are made, and there is where pretenders go to lick their wounds." The crowd appreciated her wordplay, their laughter fueling her performance. What no one noticed was how Clara's eyes tracked Skylar's movement with the focused assessment of a counter-snipper. Noting weight distribution, favored side, old injuries carefully concealed beneath professional bravado. Her seemingly submissive silence was actually a tactical calculation. Every second in Skylar's spotlight was another second to gather intelligence. The gym's resident physical therapist, setting up his station for the inevitable aftermath of Hell Sparring Day, watched the scene unfold with professional detachment. He'd seen this pattern before, newcomers hazed to breaking point, either fleeing never to return or being absorbed into Black Steel's toxic hierarchy. Something about this particular target made him uneasy, though he couldn't articulate why. "You'll need my services after today," he called to Clara, his comment drawing fresh laughter. Clara's eyes met his briefly, and the complete absence of fear or uncertainty caused him to look away first. An unexpected role reversal that left him slightly unsettled. Skylar checked her watch theatrically. "Iron Bear should be here any minute. I'd suggest stretching properly, Mouse. It might prevent something important from getting broken." Her entourage of assistant trainers chuckled on cue, their loyalty purchased with proximity to her success. The atmosphere in the gym continued to thicken with anticipation, the regular members sensing the approaching spectacle like sharks detecting blood in water. Clara remained the calm center of this growing storm, her preparation methodical and unhurried as the trap closed around her. A trap she appeared to be walking into willingly, for reasons only she understood. The temperature in the gym seemed to drop as Clara approached the ring area. A former champion with 3 visible scars across his brow leaned against the ropes, inspecting her with calculated disdain. "Nobody important," he said to his training partner, loud enough for all to hear. "Not even worth looking up." His dismissal carried weight. Fighters respected his opinion. A clipboard-carrying trainer stepped directly into Clara's path. "The Pilates class is down the street," he said, triggering snickers from nearby observers. Even a female fighter with championship belts from 3 weight classes shook her head. "Someone should tell her before she gets disappointed," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. Behind the scenes, Skylar's plan unfolded with practiced efficiency. She nodded to a staff member who slipped into the locker room. Minutes later, he returned with a barely perceptible nod. Clara's shoes had been tampered with. The laces strategically loosened, the soles compromised. "Here," Skylar said, handing Clara a set of hand wraps so thin they might as well have been tissue paper. "These will do for your level." Clara accepted them without comment, her fingers testing the flimsy material. For just a flicker of a second, something dangerous flashed in her eyes. Recognition, not surprise, before her expression returned to neutral. She tucked the wraps into her pocket, her silence now concealing not weakness, but a strategy of her own. This wasn't the first time Skylar had orchestrated such a welcome. Black Steel had developed a reputation in underground fighting circles for testing newcomers, particularly those who didn't fit their predetermined mold of what a fighter should look like. These tests had sent dozens of hopefuls to urgent care over the years, their injuries always explained away as training accidents or lack of proper conditioning. Clara moved toward a corner to continue her preparation. The gym's operations manager, a former heavyweight with fingers permanently misshapen from years without proper medical attention, approached her with exaggerated concern. "First time in a real gym?" he asked, his voice pitched to carry. "We've got excellent insurance." The implication was clear. She would need it. Clara adjusted her cap slightly. "I'll be fine." Her 3-word response triggered more amusement than it warranted. The manager walked away shaking his head, announcing to his colleagues, "She says she'll be fine," triggering a fresh wave of laughter. What none of them saw was how Clara's eyes tracked the staff member who had returned from the locker room. Noting his position, his interaction with Skylar, the slight nod that passed between them. Nor did they notice how she subtly checked the contents of her gym bag, verifying something hidden beneath her spare clothing. In the women's changing area, 2 female fighters discussed Clara, while wrapping their hands with professional-grade material, the same quality Skylar had deliberately withheld. "It's worse for us when someone like her shows up," said the first, a bantamweight with national credentials. "Makes all women look like we don't belong." "Skylar will make an example of her," replied her training partner. "Same as that college girl last month." Neither mentioned how that example had resulted in a dislocated shoulder and concussion, or how the college girl had been a legitimate amateur boxer with potential. Black Steel's culture demanded compliance with its hierarchy, and speaking against it meant risking your own position. Near the ring, the referee for the day's sessions checked his watch. He was a former fighter whose career had ended after a controversial disqualification for excessive fouls, a history that made him particularly suited for Hell Sparring Day, where his selective enforcement of rules served Skylar's purposes. 10 minutes until the bear arrives," he announced, triggering a stir of anticipation. Clara had positioned herself near a support column, using it to shield her movements as she made slight adjustments to her equipment. She removed a roll of medical tape from her bag, reinforcing her wrists beneath the sleeve of her faded tank top. Preparation that would have alarmed the more experienced observers had they noticed. A young fighter, newer to Black Steel's culture, and not yet fully indoctrinated, approached her with genuine curiosity rather than mockery. "You know what you're getting into, right?" he asked quietly, his concern seemingly authentic. Clara's eyes met his, and something in her steady gaze made him take an involuntary step back. "Probably better than anyone here," she replied, her voice carrying a certainty that momentarily confused him before he retreated to the safety of his training group. Across the gym, Skylar completed her preparations for the spectacle. Black Steel's hell-sparing days had become social media events, with highlights regularly going viral in fighting communities. Today promised content that would boost the gym's profile even further. The humiliation of an outsider who had wandered into territory where she didn't belong. The potential for disaster never factored into her calculations. This was entertainment, not sport. The atmosphere electrified as Jason Iron Bear made his entrance. At 6'5" and 220 pounds, he moved with surprising agility for a man his size, every step announcing his ownership of the space. 3 state championship belts, countless underground tournament victories, and a reputation for ruthless efficiency had made him Black Steel's crown jewel. His eyes found Clara immediately, assessing her with practiced dismissal. "This is my opponent," he asked, loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. "I thought today was supposed to be a challenge." The gym erupted in appreciative laughter as Jason rolled his massive shoulders, his custom gloves gleaming under the lights. Skylar circled the ring, her smile sharp as she performed for the audience. "Bear, remember she's just here for the experience," she called, triggering more laughter. Jason approached Clara, using his height to tower over her. "I'll give you 5 seconds," he said, his voice rumbling through the now silent gym. 5 seconds before you learn the difference between fitness and fighting. The equipment manager joined in, gesturing to a faint scar visible on Clara's shoulder. "Souvenir from your aerobics class?" he asked, triggering fresh laughter. Clara finally looked up, her hazel eyes meeting Jason's with startling directness. Something in her steady gaze made him blink first. A millisecond of uncertainty that no one else noticed, but that sent an involuntary chill down his spine. He covered it quickly with a smirk as he turned away to acknowledge his fans. But for that brief moment, doubt had flickered across the champion's face. Clara's fingers moved with practiced efficiency as the ring prepared for what everyone assumed would be a brief, one-sided exhibition. She pretended to stumble slightly, providing the expected entertainment. Hashtags already trending on social media predicting her immediate defeat. "Looks like she's already falling," someone called out, triggering fresh laughter. In that moment of distraction, Clara quietly reached into her duffel bag. The shoes she removed were different from her initial pair, military-grade footwear with specialized grips, their worn appearance masking professional quality. She switched them with fluid movements, every second accounted for. The hand wraps she'd been given lay discarded as she produced her own from a hidden pocket in her hoodie. High-grade competition standard, providing the proper support for what was to come. A seasoned trainer at the edge of the crowd frowned, noticing something in Clara's methodical preparation. "Something's not right," he murmured to his colleague. "Look at her, too calm." His observation went unheard amid the excitement. Phone cameras focused on capturing what everyone assumed would be an embarrassing defeat. No one paying attention to Clara's preparation. No one noticing how she tested her footing with subtle shifts of weight, or how her eyes catalogued every detail of the ring. The bell rang, slicing through the anticipation. Jason burst forward with explosive speed, unleashing a combination that had felled opponents twice Clara's size. His low kicks swept toward her legs with devastating power, his confidence absolute in the face of such an obviously mismatched opponent. Clara moved. Her evasion wasn't just effective, it was artistic. Each step precisely calculated, distance managed with microscopic precision. Jason's strikes found empty air where she should have been, his power wasted against nothing. 10 seconds passed. The crowd's laughter began to falter. Jason's expression shifted from confidence to concentration, then to the first hints of frustration as this supposedly easy target continued to evade him, with an economy of movement that spoke of years of disciplined training. Clara's performance was a masterclass in defensive maneuvering. Not the panicked retreat everyone had expected, but calculated evasion that preserved energy while forcing her opponent to expend his. Her footwork left minimal patterns for Jason to read, her head movement presenting no consistent target for his increasingly aggressive strikes. The crowd's mood shifted subtly. Phones still recorded, but the anticipated humiliation narrative was faltering as seconds ticked by without Clara hitting the canvas. Murmurs rippled through the observers as Jason's breathing became audible, his massive frame generating tremendous power but requiring corresponding energy to move. "How is she still standing?" whispered one of the betting circle participants, his wager on a 5-second knockout already lost. Skylar's confident smile tightened at the edges. This wasn't following the expected script. Her eyes narrowed as she studied Clara's movement more carefully, professional assessment overriding her performance as host. Something about the woman's defensive patterns triggered recognition, a fighting style she had encountered before but couldn't immediately place. Jason increased his aggression, abandoning technical precision for overwhelming force. His massive frame surged forward, cutting off the ring with practiced efficiency, a strategy that had trapped countless opponents against the ropes where his superior strength could be fully leveraged. Clara adjusted seamlessly. Her retreats became circular rather than linear, maintaining consistent distance while conserving the space available to maneuver. It was the movement of someone intimately familiar with ring geometry, who understood fighting spaces as mathematical rather than physical constructs. "Stop dancing and fight," Jason growled, his frustration mounting as he continued to hit nothing but air. The gym had fallen into relative silence, the initial mockery replaced by focused observation. Even those who had been most dismissive of Clara were now watching with professional interest rather than amusement. Something unexpected was unfolding. Not yet a competitive match, but certainly not the quick demolition everyone had anticipated. One of Jason's entourage leaned toward his colleague. "I've seen this before," he muttered, his voice low enough that only those closest could hear. "Military-style defensive system, designed to exhaust larger opponents." The observation spread quietly through the inner circle of experienced fighters. Their eyes now tracked Clara's movement with newfound respect, recognizing the technical proficiency required to maintain such precise distance against an elite striker. Jason, sensing the shift in atmosphere, redoubled his efforts. His combination attacks grew more complex, mixing levels and angles in patterns that had overwhelmed former champions. He committed fully to a particularly vicious liver shot, the technique that had become his signature finish. An attack so powerful that opponents often couldn't rise from the canvas after experiencing it. The strike missed by millimeters as Clara pivoted at precisely the right moment, her timing so perfect it seemed she had anticipated the move before Jason himself had decided to execute it. The momentum of his missed attack left him momentarily overextended, a microscopic window of vulnerability that would be imperceptible to most opponents. Clara's hazel eyes registered the opening, a flash of calculation crossing her features as she maintained her defensive position rather than capitalizing on the opportunity. She wasn't yet ready to reveal her true capabilities. Each second of sustained evasion served her larger strategy, building both Jason's frustration and the crowd's growing uncertainty about the inevitable outcome they had so confidently predicted. Exactly 11 seconds into the match, Jason committed to a powerful cross, overextending his growing frustration. It was the mistake Clara had been waiting for, a millimeter of imbalance, a microsecond of vulnerability. What happened next would be replayed in slow motion across fighting forums worldwide, analyzed by trainers and fighters seeking to understand the perfect execution of one of combat sport's most devastating techniques. Clara pivoted. Her entire body became a coiled spring, energy transferring from ground to feet to hips to torso in a flawless kinetic chain. Her spinning motion generated torque that belied her small frame, creating force that physics professors would later use as a textbook example of efficient energy transfer. The liver shot, her right foot connecting with surgical precision to the exact point where Jason's massive rib cage offered the least protection to the organ beneath, landed with a sound that silenced the entire gym. Jason didn't immediately fall. For one suspended moment, he stood frozen, eyes wide with shock and recognition, the look of a fighter who suddenly understands they've made a catastrophic error. The color drained from his face as the pain signal traveled from liver to brain, overwhelming his nervous system. Then, like a redwood finally surrendering to gravity, the 220-pound champion collapsed. His massive frame hit the canvas face first, his body twitching involuntarily as his autonomic nervous system struggled to process the perfect strike. The gem fell into absolute silence. The only sound was the buzzing of the overhead lights and Jason's labored breathing as he lay incapacitated on the mat. Phone cameras remained raised, but fingers stopped recording as disbelief rippled through the crowd. Clara stood perfectly still, her breathing barely elevated, her posture relaxed but ready, the stance of a predator who had merely executed exactly what she had planned all along. Time seemed suspended in the vacuum created by Jason's collapse. The gem's constant background noise, the thud of heavy bags, the rhythm of jump ropes, the clatter of weights, had ceased entirely as everyone focused on the impossible scene before them. Iron Bear, undefeated in 3 years of competition, lay immobilized by a woman half his size whom they had been mocking minutes earlier. The medical team broke the spell, rushing forward with professional urgency. Their movements emphasized the severity of Jason's condition. This wasn't a knockdown requiring a standing 8 count, but a potentially serious medical event. The lead physician knelt beside Jason, checking vital signs with practiced efficiency while signaling for her colleagues to prepare an oxygen mask. What did she do to him? The question rippled through the crowd, spoken by newer members who had never witnessed a perfectly executed liver shot. A veteran fighter near the ring provided the answer, his voice carrying in the unnatural quiet. Hepatic shock. Precision liver strike. Textbook execution. His tone carried something rarely heard in Black Steel's environment. Genuine respect. Jason's entourage stood frozen, their carefully constructed image of invincibility shattered in 11 seconds. The fighter who had recognized Clara's defensive system earlier now stared with dawning recognition. Military competition circuit, he murmured. There was a fighter, small like her. They called her. Skylar cut him off with a sharp gesture, her face tight with growing alarm. She approached the ring with forced confidence, attempting to regain control of a situation rapidly spinning beyond her management. Lucky shot, she announced loudly, but her declaration fell flat in the face of what everyone had witnessed. There had been nothing lucky about Clara's execution. It had been precision distilled into a single, perfect moment. On the canvas, Jason had regained enough control to roll onto his side, curling protectively around his traumatized liver. The position, fetal and vulnerable, contrasted starkly with his earlier dominance. His custom gloves no longer gleamed with threatening potential, but lay useless against the mat as he struggled to regulate his breathing. Clara remained where she stood, making no victory gesture, claiming no triumph. Her hazel eyes surveyed the gym with the same calm assessment she had maintained throughout. The scar on her shoulder, previously mocked as a souvenir from aerobics class, now seemed to carry a different significance, a battle mark earned in contests far more serious than anything Black Steel had witnessed. The referee approached hesitantly, uncertain of protocol in a situation so far outside the expected script. Match, he began, then faltered, looking towards Skylar for guidance. In any legitimate competition, the outcome would have been unquestionable. A clear knockout requiring immediate medical attention for the fallen fighter. But Black Steel's hell-sparing day operated by different rules, where outcomes were predetermined by social hierarchy rather than skill. Clara's gaze shifted to the referee, her expression making it clear she understood the politics at play and was waiting to see how the gym's authorities would respond to this dramatic restructuring of their reality. The moment stretched into uncomfortable silence, power dynamics visibly realigning throughout the room as Jason's invincibility, and by extension, Skylar's authority, lay as broken as the champion himself on the sweat-soaked canvas. Medical staff rushed to Jason's side as he remained on the canvas, still conscious but unable to rise, his legendary toughness worthless against the perfectly placed shot that had momentarily shut down his system. Clara stepped forward, taking the supervisor's microphone with quiet authority. When she spoke, her voice carried effortlessly through the stunned silence, each word precise and measured. "I knew about the loosened shoes," she said, her eyes sweeping across faces that now avoided her gaze. "I knew about the substandard wraps. I knew about the entire setup designed to humiliate me." She turned toward Jason, who was now sitting up with assistants, still struggling to regain his composure. "Jason Iron Bear, 6 years as Illinois Underground champion," she continued, her tone neither mocking nor angry, simply stating facts. "I'm the woman who defeated you in the 2017 Military MMA Championship. You never knew my identity because at that time, I competed under a different name." A ripple ran through the crowd as recognition dawned on the faces of the more knowledgeable fighters. "Black Mantis," someone whispered, the name spreading like wildfire through the gym. Clara nodded once, confirming without arrogance. 3 weeks ago, I'd acquired a controlling interest in Black Steel Combat Academy through my investment firm, Storm Holdings. I spent that time observing how this establishment operates. She paused, giving weight to her next words. Effective immediately, every person involved in today's setup is removed from their position. Jason, your record of rules violations means you're now banned from competing in any state-sanctioned event. The silence deepened as the full implications set in. This wasn't just an upset victory. It was a complete reorganization of power, executed with the same precision as her liver shot. The name Black Mantis continued to ripple through the crowd, growing in volume as fighters searched their memories and made connections. The most experienced among them had already pulled out phones, searching fight archives to confirm what seemed impossible. 3 consecutive military championship titles, read one fighter from his screen, voice carrying in the silence. Undefeated in 43 professional bouts. Specialization in precision striking against larger opponents. Images began circulating on screens throughout the gym, Clara in military competition gear, her face partially obscured by protective headgear, but unmistakably the same woman. The timestamp on the footage showed matches from years earlier, documenting a career that had been legendary in specialized fighting circuits before she had seemingly disappeared from competition. Skylar pushed through the crowd, her composure fracturing. "This is ridiculous. You can't just walk in and..." "The paperwork was finalized last month," Clara interrupted, her calm unwavering. "Your investors were quite eager to sell once they reviewed the documentation of safety violations, insurance fraud, and competition fixing." This new revelation sent another shockwave through the gathering. The gym's inner circle exchanged alarmed glances, suddenly understanding that Clara's appearance wasn't random. It was the culmination of a carefully orchestrated plan. Jason, now sitting upright, though still supported by medical staff, stared at Clara with dawning recognition. "The military tournament," he managed, his voice ragged. "Final round. I never saw your face." Clara acknowledged this with a slight nod. Tactical visors were standard equipment. "You were disqualified for an illegal strike sequence after I knocked you down." The memory seemed to hit Jason as hard as the liver shot had. His reputation had been built partly on the claim that he had never been legitimately defeated, a narrative that Clara's presence now exposed as fiction. A gym official approached Clara, tablet in hand, verification of her ownership claim displayed on the screen. His professional demeanor couldn't fully mask his shock at how completely they had all misread the situation. "Ms. Wynne," he said, attempting to regain some procedural formality, "we weren't informed of any ownership transition." "That was intentional," Clara replied. "I needed to assess the culture without interference." Her silence now carried a different quality, not the assumed timidity that had invited mockery, but the calculated restraint of someone who had already won before the battle began. The phones that had been raised to record Clara's expected humiliation now documented something entirely different. The moment when Black Steel's power structure crumbled under the weight of its own arrogance. Several fighters were already downloading the footage, recognizing its historical significance in Chicago's fighting community. The aftermath unfolded with the methodical precision that had characterized Clara's fighting style. Skylar stood near her office. Her once commanding presence diminished as security collected her access cards and credentials. The fighters who had laughed loudest now found reasons to be elsewhere, their earlier mockery transformed into uncomfortable silence. The head trainer approached Clara, his clipboard no longer a symbol of authority, but a shield he held before him. "You're in charge now," he said, question and statement blended in his uncertain tone. Clara's response was a single nod, acknowledgement without triumph. The gym's social hierarchy collapsed around her. The female fighter who had joined in the mockery found herself isolated, other women fighters keeping clear distance to signal their disassociation from her behavior. The referee who had anticipated Clara's humiliation learned his services would no longer be required. As Clara collected her belongings, the head trainer addressed the still stunned crowd. "Mantis Academy begins today," he announced, his voice finding new strength. "No more setups. No more targeting newcomers. Wynne has shown us what real skill looks like, and that's what we'll honor going forward." Clara moved toward the exit, her mission complete. She dropped her gloves with a soft thud that nonetheless echoed in the silent gym, a period at the end of a definitive statement. The crowd parted instinctively, whispers following her path. "That's Black Mantis. 3 international titles. Military champion." She didn't acknowledge the newfound respect, her cap still pulled low as she pushed through the heavy door into the Chicago afternoon. Behind her, the transformation had already begun. Staff removed the Black Steel sign, while others drafted a new code of conduct. The new name, Mantis Academy, would be accompanied by a simple philosophy engraved beside the entrance. "Judge by skill, not appearance. Fight with honor, not cruelty." Clara had succeeded without a single word of self-promotion or anger. She'd used one perfectly executed technique, both in business and in combat, to transform a toxic culture into something with potential for greatness. The story spread beyond the gym walls, becoming legend in fighting circles. How a quiet woman had been underestimated, how champions had fallen, and how one perfect liver shot had changed everything. Within hours, social media exploded with footage of the encounter. What had begun as #BearCrush and #MoseFails hashtags transformed into #BlackMantisReturns and #LiverShotLegend. Fighting analysts dissected Clara's technique frame by frame, marveling at the biomechanical perfection of her execution. The staff who remained, those who had treated newcomers with respect and focused on technique rather than humiliation, found themselves part of a rapidly restructuring organization. By nightfall, emails had gone out to all members detailing the new ownership and vision, along with a clear code of conduct that emphasized skill development and mutual respect. Jason's entourage disbanded by evening, their fortunes no longer tied to a champion whose invincibility had been exposed as myth. The fighter who had recognized Clara's military background approached her as she completed paperwork in what had been Skylar's office. "I was at that tournament," he said quietly. "You changed how smaller fighters approached competition. Many of us studied your techniques." Clara looked up, acknowledging him with a nod. "Then help me build something here that honors those principles." The receptionist who had greeted Clara with mockery cleared her desk without being asked. Understanding her position had become untenable. As she left, she passed the female championship fighter who had participated in Clara's humiliation. The woman hesitated at Clara's office door, her confidence replaced by uncertainty. "Is there still a place for me here?" she asked, her earlier disdain transformed by Clara's demonstration of what female fighting talent truly looked like. Clara assessed her with the same calm she had maintained throughout the day. "That depends on whether you're willing to earn respect rather than demand it." By midnight, videos of the encounter had reached fighting communities worldwide.